Unfortunately, though, the people behind this system of inflation, they control everything. They control the media, they control academia, they control the politicians, they control, almost everything. So people are not taught what I'm telling you here right now. They're taught that inflation is the CPI, and the CPI is just a measure of prices, which is the consequence of inflation. Thursday, September 26, 2024, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Well, we're going to look at inflation today. And yes, most of you and most people are saying, well, inflation is just above 2%. It's come down. Well, we're going to look at something completely different. And in my opinion, the definition of inflation is something that is the biggest threat to your prosperity. And I would say that over 99% of the people out there, or even 99.9%, don't really know what inflation is and are being fleeced by it, because you'll see what I mean by fleeced. And the other thing I would say is that inflation hurts the working class or the blue-collar worker a lot more disproportionately than the upper class, the very wealthy. And yes, so we're going to look at that, and I'm going to refer a really good book that I think everyone should read. And it's not difficult to read. It's about money, but it's not complicated, and it will explain to you what money really is, and then you understand what inflation is. And before I start, though, I'd like to thank all the new subscribers. There seems to be a lot of interest in the channel, and I'm happy about that, because the purpose of this channel is to wake people up about the money system that we have, or currency system. It's not just about gold and silver, even though gold and silver are really important in terms of protecting your hard-earned savings, and will continue to be. And you will see why as well when you start talking about money. And I want to start with a quote about inflation from someone called Felix Sommery. And Felix Sommery was a high-level banker, very prominent banker in the early 1900s to mid-1900s. He was originally from Vienna, Austria, and he moved to Switzerland. And I think he even moved to the United States after World War II. He advised many countries during World War I. He advised the U.S. Treasury in the run-up to Bretton Woods. And he has, there's a really good biography about Felix Sommery. It's called The Raven of Zurich. It's very difficult to find. But this is what he said, Felix Sommery, and it's in the book. You can find a free PDF online. I'm going to try to get it and put it in the description. And I quote Felix Sommery: "The state alone is responsible for inflation. Inflation without government, or indeed against government, is impossible." So we're going to get the inflation data on Friday. It's supposed to be the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation. It's called the core PCE. And the markets are going to keep an eye on that. I think it's just above 2%. So in my opinion, unless you understand what money is, you won't understand what inflation is, because inflation is a purely monetary phenomenon. And that's why I'm going to refer you to this book, What Has Government Done to Our Money, by Murray Rothbard. Many of you, of course, have read this book, those of you who have been following me for years. But to the new subscribers, I think it's paramount that you read this book. And Murray Rothbard was a proponent, and he was a member of the Austrian School of Economics. And they have a theory, it's called the regression theorem analysis of money. And that basically means that you have to go back in time in history to see how money evolved to understand it. So here on page 24, he talks about barter. He says, yet direct exchange of useful goods and services would barely suffice to keep an economy going above the primitive level. Such direct exchange or barter is hardly better than pure self-sufficiency. Why is this? For one thing, it is clear that very little production could be carried on. If Jones hires some laborers to build a house, with what will he pay them? With parts of the house or with building materials they could not use? The two basic problems are indivisibility and lack of coincidence of wants. Thus, if Smith has a plow which he would like to exchange for several different things, say eggs, bread, and a suit of clothes, how can he do so? How can he break up the plow and give part of it to a farmer and another part to a tailor? Even where the goods are divisible, it is generally impossible for two exchanges to find each other at the same time. If A has a supply of eggs for sale and B has a pair of shoes, how can they get together if A wants a suit? And think of the plight of an economics teacher who has to find an egg producer who wants to purchase a few economics lessons in return for his eggs. Clearly, any sort of civilized economy is impossible under direct exchange. So that's barter. But the thing about barter that's really interesting, you can only exchange goods and services that exist, that are real, that are useful. But, of course, it makes the development of the economy into a civilized economy where there's specialization very difficult. But I think it's really important to understand barter, because if you're going to exchange an apple for, let's say, 50 apples for a pair of shoes, and you found someone who has shoes that wants apple and you want the shoes, you're not going to write him an IOU saying I owe you 50 apples, because he'll say, no, I want the apples. So here's where indirect exchange comes, and here comes also the inflation of the currency. But let's continue here. He talks now about indirect exchange. So let's see what he says. But man discovered in the process of trial and error the route that permits a greatly expanding economy, indirect exchange. Under indirect exchange, you sell your product not for a good which you need directly, but for another good which you then in turn sell for the good you want. At first glance, this seems like a clumsy and roundabout operation, but it is actually the marvelous instrument that permits civilization to develop. Consider the case of A, the farmer who wants to buy the shoes made by B. Since B doesn't want his eggs, he finds what B wants, what B does want. Let's say butter. A then exchanges his eggs for C's butter, but then sells the butter for B for shoes. He first buys the butter not because he wants it directly, but because it will permit him to get his shoes. Similarly, Smith, a plow owner, will sell his plow for one commodity which can more readily divide and sell, say butter, and will then exchange parts of the butter for eggs, bread, and clothes, etc. In both cases, The superiority of butter, the reason there is extra demand for it beyond simple consumption, is its greater marketability. If one good is more marketable than another, if everyone is confident that it will be more readily sold, then it will come into greater demand because it will be used as a medium of exchange. It will be the medium through which one specialist can exchange his product for the goods of other specialists. It goes further, but I'm going to stop here. And so what has been in history, or at least for the last few thousand years, the most marketable commodity? Well, it has been gold and silver in terms of monetary use. And what government has done to the money is that it's through the banking system, it's hijacked the system basically by suspending money, suspending the gold standard, taking silver coinage out of circulation, and basically making you believe that the promises that you hold in forms of a dollar bill or Bank of England notes, and it's becoming less and less real because now it's all going digital, right? They make you believe that that is money, but that is just only credit, because what has happened over time is that people found out, for example, that instead of carrying around this gold coin, it was easier to carry around a promise to pay in this gold coin to the bearer, so a piece of paper. The problem with that is that crises like war and other things led the government to suspend convertibility, and that therein lies the whole problem. So what does inflation have to do with that? What really is inflation? Well, I said at the beginning of the video that the problem with inflation is the definition of inflation, that 99.9% of people out there don't really know what inflation is. And you might think, oh, that's too much. No, believe me, it is 99.9%. So what is inflation? Well, originally it was a term to define basically when the government hijacked the monetary system and inflated the money supply. Well, back in Roman times, ancient Rome, the way they did it is that they started debasing the denarius, the silver coin from Rome. How did they do that? Well, they kept the same face value. They kept silver, mostly silver around the coin, but inside they took the silver out and they put base metals. And at first people didn't notice because they didn't really take out too much silver. But eventually, as Rome expanded and became too big and had too many, was involved in too many wars, pretty much like now in the West and the rest of the world for that matter. Well, they started putting more and more base metals. People started noticing that this wasn't real silver. So if the denarius had half the silver that it was supposed to have, people twigged onto it, and prices doubled because you had half as much silver. So that was the inflation of the money supply through basically foul play. You could call it theft, but of course governments don't steal, right? Wink, wink. So that's what inflation of the currency is all about. You increase the currency supply through nefarious means. Yes, you could have inflation of the money supply. For example, when Spain was a big empire and got a lot of silver through conquest from the Americas, that increased the supply of silver in Spain, and that led to higher prices. But that was the inflation of the money supply, and it was, I guess, done through foul play, you could say, through conquest. And it can happen with gold as well, but with gold is more difficult because the supply of gold is never consumed, and the stock to flow ratio of gold is about 65 to 80 years. I'm not too sure. What that means is that there's at least 65 years of gold supply overground. So if you increase the supply of gold, it doesn't really affect the exchange rate of gold against other goods and services. So nowadays we don't even have a gold and silver, and gold and silver coinage, they're not immune to government inflation because they can always debase the coins. They did that here in the UK after World War I. They took half the silver out of the silver coinage. They suspended gold completely. But now what they do, though, is they borrow money into existence. The central bank creates reserves or money out of thin air to buy the government bonds. And when they buy the government bonds, not just from the Treasury, but from commercial banks who buy the government bonds in auctions, the central bank credits the commercial banks and the Treasury's account with fiat currency. And so when there is deficit spending and money printing, zero interest rates, that is inflation. And that's why prices keep going up. I guess technically, if we could trust the politicians and the bankers to create just enough currency to cover the growth of the economy every year, there probably wouldn't be, prices would be very stable. But of course you can't, because they always find excuses to create more and more currency out of thin air. So when you're told that CPI or core PCE is inflation, that is not real. And unfortunately, though, the people behind this system of inflation, they control everything. They control the media, they control academia, they control the politicians, they control, almost everything. So people are not taught what I'm telling you here right now. They're taught that inflation is the CPI, and the CPI is just a measure of prices, which is the consequence of inflation. So inflation hasn't gone down. Inflation is always going to go higher because it's a debt-based system. And if they stop inflating the system, the whole system implodes. But it will also implode because eventually there will be debt revulsion and people won't accept the currency anymore. So why does it hurt the common man or the blue-collar worker or the working class more? Well, it's simple. A millionaire or a billionaire earns, let's say, $100,000 a month or $1 million a month. If his budget for food and energy goes up by 5-10%, it's not really a big deal, but it is a big deal for someone who's on only £2,000 a month or $3,000 a month. It makes a much bigger difference. The other thing, people with more wealth, they can protect their wealth from inflation by buying hard assets, by buying gold and silver. So what is the solution to the inflation problem, to the inflation? Well, it's much worse than a tax because they don't call it a tax. It's something that starts with TH. Well, it's theft, basically. And why do they use inflation? Why don't they just tax you? Well, because last I've checked, taxes are already really high, and people are really struggling because of high taxation. So they have to do something else. and they do that through inflation. And of course, they're going to tell you that there is no inflation, that it's only 2%. And I also heard that the Chinese, they're going to target 3 or 4%. So they're going to be stealing even more from their citizens. And is that a reason for me to say that BRICS is failing? No, because BRICS is something different. BRICS is the Chinese and others trying to find an alternative to the dollar. And I think they're doing a good job of that. But it doesn't mean to say that the Chinese citizen is going to be treated better. So there you go. Inflation. Where can you find this book? Well, I'm going to put a link to it below in the description. You can get a free PDF, or you can buy the book from the Mises.org Institute. I highly recommend you follow Mises.org as well. It's the home, really, of the Austrian School of Economics in the US and in the world, I would say. It's the only institute of learning that really focuses on the Austrian School of Economics. So check below in the description and make sure you read this book if you want to learn about what money really is and what inflation really is, so that they can't come and rip you off. Basically, to put it in a nutshell, inflation is if you had the power to basically counterfeit money and go out there and buy stuff, you would be doing something wrong. But when government does it, it's okay, right? Not really. So let's quickly look at the markets this morning. It's 8:36 a.m. London time. So we got spot gold at 26.63. It's up $6. The high's been 64. The recent high has been 26.70. That's the all-time high right now. So yeah, gold's still doing fairly well. Silver has gotten back up above 32. The key level there really is 32.50. We need to break that level to see silver really take off. Right now we're at 32.03. It's up 22 cents. What about the stock market? Well, the Dow futures is up 129. The NASDAQ is up 1.4%. And the S&P is up 0.7%. I noticed the Dow gold ratio, and you can check that by taking the level of the Dow Industrial divided by the price of gold in troy ounces. I noticed yesterday it dropped below 16, and it's a key level. I think it was the lowest level since the beginning of 2021. So keep an eye on gold in the stock market. I think we are at the crossroads of where investors shift a lot of their wealth into hard assets and gold especially. What about the currencies? Yeah, the dollar has rebounded a bit, which has made it so the other currencies like euro and the pound, the Swiss franc, have actually gone down quite a bit against gold. And case in point, the price of gold in sterling or pounds, and I am in the UK, of course, and I'm watching this closely. We got up to like 1998 late yesterday. Right now, 1 ounce of gold costs 1,995 pounds. It's never traded at 2,000, but I think it's only a matter of time that it does. And that's a signal of inflation. The market and investors know the government is not going to stop inflating, so they're going to protect themselves with gold and silver as well. This morning, though, yeah, the currencies are pretty steady, not really much to write home about. We're seeing crude oil come off here this morning. WTI is down 2.7%, 67.68, and Brent is down 2.5%. at 71.08. I haven't seen any news out there. There might be something out there that I haven't seen. High-grade copper is up 1% though at 4.54. And what about the bond market? Well, the 2-year yield is fairly steady. It's at 3.56. But I've noticed the 10-year yield is been rising quite a bit. Ever since the Fed cut rates by 50 basis points, we've gone from 3.6 to almost 380 right now. That's a sign that investors are concerned about the longer term picture for inflation or rising. The consequence of inflation would be rising prices, but real inflation, of course, is the increase in the currency supply, not backed by real savings. It's just counterfeiting, but they don't call it that, right? Because it's government. So anyway, with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.